Welcome back to Voice Global. I'm your host, Pete Erickson. I've loved all the conversations that we're having with folks from around the world. My next guest is somebody who's special to me because I've actually known her for quite some time. Let me take you back to 2016. I was hosting a voice event at a healthcare conference in Boston, and I was looking for a keynote speaker. And I reached this person who was with Amazon at the time, who I'd never met, and told her what we were up to, and that we were looking for a keynote to deliver a message to a room full of executives in the healthcare space. And she, on that call, gave me an emphatic yes, that she wanted to do it. And it was just a little bit kind of like shocking because she was so enthusiastic and so willing to share, willing to lean in with someone she had really never met before. But we had a good conversation and she said yes. She delivered a keynote. You could hear a pin drop in that room. And after the talk, there was a lineup of 20 plus people at the stage to meet her. And she's infectious. She's brilliantly smart. And she is the founder of the AI Leadership Institute. My next guest I would love to bring on stage here is Noelle Silver. Noelle, how you doing?
Hi, so great to be here. Oh, I was like, gosh, am I going to cry? That was
I was getting
awesome.
a little teared up talking about that
I
because,
know.
you know,
I'm like, gosh, those were good times. Good
well, I
times.
tell you, in my business, in our business of connecting people, you have to have that connective tissue, and there are certain people that play that role, and when we find those people, it's magical. And you were one of those people, and then you continued to play that role. You have keynoted Voice Summit multiple times, in person and virtually, and you'll notice on the homepage for Voice Global, there's this great picture of you from our stage in Newark.
As you described me, I was like, I feel like that's kind of me all the time, enthusiastic, diving in. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think here's the thing: is you say yes, and I think that,
Yeah.
um, and that's so important. And another thing too that I would love to talk about. Well, first off, I think before we go any further, why don't you catch us up? I think one of the things I admire about you is watching your journey, and you say yes to yourself, and you
Yes.
follow a path, and that path has been leading you up like this in your career, and
Yep.
in your the importance of you as an industry figure. But tell us where you are now, because I think it's very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So the pandemic, is a thing. And I was at NPR when the pandemic started, which was an incredible, amazing opportunity. I got to lead all of engineering there, and it really kind of set me up to understand where most companies are today when it comes to technology. However, it's a nonprofit. I was making a lot of money as a senior executive in tech there, and I actually felt bad about it. I did a LinkedIn
Mm-hmm.
live going, like, I just didn't feel right in a time
Mm-hmm.
where they really needed people who were going to do the work, not necessarily lead it. And so what I ended up doing was building a bunch of leaders and then letting them lead themselves. And I was very proud of that. But then I was like, well, what am I going to do now? So I started doing things that I never thought I would do, similar to what you just said. Like, I just started to say yes to opportunities in a new way. So I went to Hacker U and led the development of data science and AI curriculum across 7 universities. And then once I was done with that, I went to Electrify and played around with artificial intelligence and applied AI models. But what I understood, or what I realized in all of the conversations I get to have, number one, is I'm never afraid to say yes, right? I'm never afraid to
Mm-hmm.
go, you know what, that could be cool. If the
Mm-hmm.
opportunity presents itself and I'm aligned with it, I say yes and I go in. And I try not to let the world tell me that it's not okay.
Right.
And then most recently, I was approached by actually a company I've worked at before, and in a different time though, in a new era. And so I just recently joined Red Hat as a specialist in AI and ML for managed containers, managed OpenShift, and really how do we help companies deploy more applications? Because that ended up being my biggest struggle. Is I'd go into
Right.
companies and I'd give them the big idea. Here's
Right.
AI, here's
Right.
voice. And they'd
Right.
be like, so we're struggling to deploy a pipeline for like our mobile apps.
Right.
Or-
Right. 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 Right.
and,
Like we
and so
gotta get the we
I
gotta get
feel
the
like,
basic we gotta get the basics done before we can get
yeah.
there.
And
Right.
then, but leave that carrot of the dream of AI and the dream of voice integration, like leave it available, and they actually can do both. And that's what I'm
Mhm.
hoping to help companies do now through this new opportunity. So yeah, kind of cool. Back at Red Hat, I wish I had my fedora. I have a new red
I
fedora.
I have
Very
seen that. I've seen that fedora. It's very, very cool. I
yeah,
love that.
it's cool.
Um, I think, you know, the human aspect of AI. I think that there is uh, clearly, as an engineer, you know the deep technical aspects of AI,
Yeah,
and but there's this human side, and the human side is are the people that are actually looking to implement AI, machine learning, voice technology, and you are somebody who regularly just gives. You give information, you give knowledge and share, and it connects you with people. I think in a really unique way. Is that part of just who you are? And when did that start for you? Where you just kind of just give all the time. You're just not afraid to just share the knowledge that you've got, even if it's really fresh. You're just like, hey, I
yeah. I
learned
actually
this.
think it's probably connected to why I started my career. Kind of, I mean, I was at IBM for a long time, and then Red Hat recruited me away. And the reason they could, because I loved IBM, I bled blue for a long time.
Nice,
The reason
nice.
they could was because they had this philosophy of openness, not
Hmm.
just openness in code, but openness in management, openness in collaboration. I mean, Red Hat just did this whole like corporate rebranding. They didn't do it in a room with 12 executives. Like they open sourced the branding of their
I love
company.
it.
You know,
I
and,
love it.
and
I
openness,
love it.
to your point, I actually think I've been like that my whole life. I remember as a child, my dad kind of leading me into like a mantra or meditation. And he would say, what I would say to myself, and he would lead me into is, I nourish the world and the world nourishes me. And
Mm,
it was just this like reciprocal behavior, not in an intention to get anything, but just that if I constantly give, everything that I have, as soon as I learn it, I teach it. As soon as I,
hmm.
master it, I, find somebody who's not quite there yet and get them to the next chapter.
Right.
That I never have to worry. Like my career, I've always had another role. I've
Mm,
always, and bad things have happened. I've had all sorts of
sure.
crazy things
Sure.
happen, but this philosophy has led me to, I mean, I had a terrible like ending at Microsoft, or so I thought. I ended up getting fired for some nonsense reason. We see it all the time. And I was like, but I mean, I'm a hard worker. I just got a performance excellence award. How
Right.
do you let me go? And
Right.
but immediately in that moment, I think that week I went and delivered a talk about Microsoft, about the company that I could have
Right.
easily been bitter about, right?
Right.
And so, but it is in this where I embrace like the technology, I embrace what's good about it, I embrace who is served by it. And then a year later, I ended up getting awarded the MVP in AI at Microsoft, right? So
I know.
you
It's
just
it
keep
is a
this
remarkable
other,
story. I was close with you through that period.
yes,
And
it was
the
tough.
way you handle yourself is a lesson for everybody out there. I think that that's also, you teach by example, and I think that that's been so
Yes,
cool. And thank you so much for just sharing, authentically what happened there. And yes, because things do happen. We I've been fired myself from a job, but it was a defining moment for me. It's really what led me to be doing this today, to be, to be a community builder. I said, well,
yeah.
I'm taking matters into my own hands now. And these things can't open doors. And I think what I hear you saying is that um, always be ready to open that next door. That's sort of like how you live. And that's through giving back, and that's through teaching.
Yep. And that, all these people that I've helped inadvertently through some, small little demo I did and was willing to share. I teach engineers all the time. I'm like, if you're learning something, and I'm doing this right now, I'm learning OpenShift for the first time. I've
Hmm.
deployed an app for, it's so awesome because I'm like,
Yeah.
I feel like a kid again learning
Hello
this.
world. Hello world.
Right. But how much more fun it is when I record it and put it somewhere where people who are one chapter behind me or who are thinking about learning a new thing go, wow, that's so cool that she just did that, right? Like, or
Right,
he just did that, or they just
right,
did that. And
right.
so I find that being willing to share where you are, we call it like the messy middle, not at the
Mhm.
beginning when you're all shiny and new, not at the
Right,
end when you're super upset, but like through
right,
the whole process, including the middle as you're gaining new skills. And the more you share, the more people, come into your network. And so when something crazy happens that you don't expect, which you could perceive as bad, it actually turns out to be a door. And when that
right.
door opens, you can be ready to step through it.
That's right. No, so cool. Um, so what do you think, you now that you're at, Red Hat OpenShift, how much of what you're gonna be doing, reflects back on your journey through the voice tech landscape, that you really spent the last, I don't know, 5, 6 years, very,
Yep.
very close to, and at multiple companies, I would add, close with, Alexa, close with Microsoft and Cortana,
Yep.
um, and other organizations. How much of what you're gonna be doing now is sort of still tangential to the voice tech landscape?
Yeah, it's directly aligned. So that's I mean, of course, maybe it is, but
Yeah,
that's the
yeah,
good
yeah.
news that,
Sure.
I'm always looking for, and this is also a testament to just kind of mindset. I'm always looking for what are the people I talk to, what problems do they have? And is there something that I could do? Because where I thrive and where I'm excited and enthusiastic is when I do something and someone writes me a note and they're like, oh my gosh, that saved me, whatever. Or, oh my goodness, we rethought everything and this is exactly what we wanted to do. And we just didn't know that it was out there. And so,
Mhm.
as an evangelist at heart, and as somebody who's constantly kind of sharing my journey, I feel like why I went to Red Hat and specifically for OpenShift is that they just now started to move into workloads in artificial intelligence. And
Mm.
I'll tell you a funny anecdote. When I first started at Alexa in 2014, right, we just launched the product. There were no code pipelines. Right? It was
Right,
all data science and very little software engineering. And
right.
that's kind of the world we're in today is where we've got like IT pros, we've got developers, we've got
Mhm.
NPR. I had a voice team, make it two, right? One for Alexa, one for Google. And then I
Mhm.
had a mobile team, one for Apple, one for Google, again for
Right,
Android,
right, right,
right? And so I'm silos, even if your heart does not want them, they just tend to generate out of these technical
right,
solutions
right,
you build. So I've
right.
always, I think I talked about this in the keynote I did last year, maybe the year before for this for the voice sessions, is we want this, one platform to rule them all kind of idea, right? Like,
Mhm.
how do we make sure that when we're thinking about the customer experience, we're not building up all these divergent paths that ultimately will lead to a lowest
Right,
common denominator of experience. We want to instead build something that is the highest level of
right.
experience, but then is channeled out to the right channels, right? What is the right thing to do on Alexa versus what's
Mhm.
everything we can do? What's the right
Right.
thing to do in CarPlay? What's the right
Mhm.
thing to do, on my website versus on my mobile? But the back end is shared and these channels
Mhm.
are developed to create a multimodal strategy. And so the hardest thing about all of that is the infrastructure, right? How do I
Sure.
build servers? And, serverless was an idea for a while,
Yep.
but the reality was dependencies, jar files, like all the tech stuff that most people don't want to know about. It's what breaks our machines. It's what breaks
Yeah.
our code is all these little things. So if I could be part of a solution that tells companies, you know what? Let's make that a non-issue, right? Let's
Right.
create it in a reusable way. Let's deploy applications consistently so you can push out Alexa apps if you want
Right.
to.
Right.
Or you have maybe a roadmap of 6 months, 8 months from now, maybe you'll think about Alexa. If you
Right.
simplify what you're doing today, maybe that road gets shorter. And that's my
Sure.
goal is how do I get more
Simplification.
people building this stuff? Yes. Yes.
Simplification in a very complex world. I think that's a
Yes.
very, very, very noble pursuit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We'll
and
see.
yeah, no, I think it's funny. It's simplification. It's easier said than done.
Yep.
Right? It's
Exactly. Right. That's
it's
a
so
t-shirt
funny.
I'll have to make.
Right, right. So let's talk a little bit about, we've watched this market. I think, And it shifted, right? When I started out in this space, we were doing developer workshops around the country, and that culminated in us creating Voice Summit, because we felt like there was not a conference for this market. But
Yeah.
in 2016, 17, 18, it was all developers. It was about building this new developer ecosystem. That really hasn't come to fruition the way that I think people thought it might. And we're sort of in this reemergence of the reality that voice is an enterprise application. Conversational AI is an enterprise application right now. And we're seeing it at this conference over and over and over again.
That's right.
But what I would just love to hear your comment on that, and in terms of like the evolution of the market and where you think we are from a voice tech industry.
Yeah. So one of the reasons that, I'm in the position I am at Red Hat is because it's not a developer conversation anymore. And as I've started to take on executive leadership roles, multiple VP positions, and now I'm, basically in a role at Red Hat where I'm going to be speaking to the C-suite at most companies, I've realized now it's less about can I build a thing and more about how do we strategically align with the idea of what AI offers. And natural language is one of them, being able to voice enable our world and our brands. That's one thing. But then also, what about, like we've talked about this before, ubiquitous computing, right? If I'm a brand, I don't want it to be a thing. I don't want people to even think twice. And this is how I was raised, right? I was raised on all these books, Asimov and Bradbury and all of these science fiction authors that said, like, you were always talking to a computer, but it was never the star. It was always this like idea in the background that was, nascent.
It was ambient. It was ambient. It was
ambient. Yeah. And so we have the idea, we now have the tech. And I always say, I feel like the burden is on us as the product owners, us as the developers, the user experience designers, to say, how do we get there? Like, how do we get from, okay, we basically are at hello world for voice tech, right? Like, let me invoke a skill. Let me start a meditation. How do we go, okay, we now, hello world, we're here. How do we now go to, I just bought a new Weber grill for Father's Day, and it's web enabled, mobile enabled. But what could that experience truly have been like, right? Like, could it know that, how do we capture information about our users? How do we create transparency so they're comfortable with that capturing? I think it's a long journey. I always say that we underestimate or overestimate what we can do, in 1 to 3 years, and underestimate what we can do in a longer period of time. And what that means to me is, like, for the last 5 years, I thought we'd be so much further than now. It's kind of when I was a kid and watching the Jetsons. I thought we'd be in flying cars by now. But we're now approaching year 7 of Alexa. We now have the ability to build integrations that we never had before, right? The platform is more open than it's ever been. It's still not open enough, but it's more open than it's ever been. But more importantly, companies are building platforms that don't require a siloed solution, right? Microsoft has open sourced a virtual assistant, build your own. Companies like NASA and BMW are like, you know what? BMW is like, I'm going to build Joy, and Joy is going to be a voice assistant we own. And they leverage the world's interest in speaking, which Alexa and Google certainly, got us more comfortable doing. But now it's up to these brands and up to the, us as users to really say, what is a good experience today? And that's where I think, all of us who've been here a long time, building skills for a long time, I think we have to evolve past, like, how do I build a cool skill? And really, how does a brand, leverage the power of, ubiquity, or the power of, ambience? Because I don't think we're there yet.
What would you say to people that are just kind of like coming into this industry, because they don't have the perspective that you do, or that I do, or a lot of us that have been in the space for a long time, that hey, maybe try to build a skill, that's fun, or an action, that's great, but really, this is where this industry is going. But what would you say to someone who's just kind of coming in?
Yeah, one of the things I think is interesting, I actually have, I'm doing a keynote for ITSC, which is like this huge educational conference. And it's funny because, again, we're in like year 7 of doing this. And I'm still talking about like like there are still use cases we haven't even touched. And so
Right.
oftentimes what I encourage, and this is also true with Microsoft and their AI offering, and really any cloud provider, they've provided artificial intelligence in a box as a
Sure.
service,
Yeah.
right? And you can use
Yep.
it in any way you want. The
Right.
problem is that people aren't able to articulate what they want. And so what I encourage people who are new to the field is think about today, like your problems. This is how I got in, right? I was like, oh my gosh, I have a son with Down syndrome. Man, the world would be cool if he could just search YouTube with his voice. And back then
Right.
that wasn't possible, right?
Right.
Or what if my dad, who has cognitive and traumatic brain injury, what if he didn't have to ask me a bunch of questions he asked me every day? What if I could get him to
Right.
ask Alexa? What if I could create a routine?
Right.
What if I could empower him to turn his lights on and off, to turn on the vacuum
Mhm.
cleaner? Like,
Mhm.
what if I could give him some sense of empowerment and
Mhm.
individualness, right? Being able to live
Mhm.
alone. He doesn't, he
Mhm.
lives with me, but still owning some part of his life that I'm not like, don't forget to do this, don't, and like
Mhm.
it gives that was my motivation. And so I often
Sure.
say people that are new to this, what's broken? What in the world
Right.
do you wish was fixed? And it could
Right.
be the biggest socioeconomic problem that you want to fix, or it could be
Right.
something like me, a person in your home that you want to help, maybe even yourself.
Yep.
But I do think being, problem driven or challenge oriented, right, will help build a vision for what's possible because the tech is there. Someone like me, you, the community we've built at Voice Global,
Sure.
right, will help with the tech part. But I
Right.
do think that some of the challenge is actually in getting the people with the problem to
Yeah.
articulate that problem in the same room as us who know how to
Right.
solve these problems with the
Right.
technology.
I think it's great advice. I think that keeping it, yeah, just look around. There was somebody, I'm trying to remember who, but somebody was that we were interviewing said, if someone's going to come in and interview with me, I want them to look at my company and I want them to actually come with recommendations. Like,
Yeah.
what could be fixed? What are we doing that could be done better? And just, like, I think that's a great approach to the market. Come into the market and actually look around and say,
Yeah.
why isn't this being done?
I'll tell
um,
you, in the spirit of open source, when I built my skills, all of my skills are on GitHub. And then, of course, all of my skills are published on Alexa. So people, and they did this, they would go to my Alexa skills, look at my reviews, and then go grab my code, fork it, and build a new version that satisfied those goals. I mean, that's
right,
product creation
right,
101. Find
right.
out what people need and want and build it, and I was happy to do it. I was happy to see it. I remember pulling up my skill, and this other skill was like same exact name, but solved the problems I didn't have time to solve, and they ranked higher than me. And I was like, at first,
Oh, come on.
but then I
Well,
went
that's
and
pretty
saw what
cool.
they did, and I was like, this is exactly why open source exists, because I actually don't have time for that, and I don't want to build the dev team, and I don't do
Right,
all that.
right.
So it was
Well,
awesome,
it
though.
just it also just you know uh, reaffirms what I said at the outset, that you are so willing to give, and not only giving advice in your videos, you're giving your code and everything that comes with it. And clearly, that's take you're such a great example. That works. You know
It
that
worked.
that works, and we're raised in a society where the opposite is what's taught, right? Intellectual
Yeah,
property. Hold
yeah,
on to it. Hold on
yeah.
to it. Don't tell anybody
Scarcity.
your
Yeah,
idea. Don't share anybody your code. But actually, we're in a different place. I mean, that's
yeah.
and there's an incredible amount of value to giving. What's your GitHub ID so people can find you?
Yeah, it's Unity Girl, UNITYGIRL. So I would love to see you. You can see all my skill there. And now I'm building a bunch of different types of apps that are multimodal and deploying them to OpenShift so you can watch the journey.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Well, I have to tell you, Noelle, this has been one of my favorite interviews. It is so great to see you. It's fun to follow your career. It's fun to watch your videos and how much you're willing to share and bring others into this industry and lift them up. It says wonders about you, and we look forward to staying in touch and just a little hint, we're going to do something live in person this fall. We were originally, I mean, things have gone pretty well with regards to the vaccine and people getting back together. And we really feel like it's time to get back together in person. I
That
know
would be
you're just
amazing.
down the coast. So hopefully you'll come up to DC and see us. We would love to have you.
Oh, absolutely. I love the Voice Global community. I'm so glad we made this happen. So thank you so much for having me. I'm always like, open source, open mind. I even just created a t-shirt, open source, open mind, open heart. And that's
Oh my
like
God.
me.
Okay. Want, want. So,
Well,
Noelle,
thanks so
thank
much
you
for having me.
again. Thank you again. And I'm Pete Erickson, your host of Voice Global. We've been talking with Noelle Silver, the CEO or the founder of the AI Leadership Institute, and now she's at Red Hat OpenShift. Definitely follow her uh, across social, across GitHub, and it'll be a great learning experience for you and support you in your career and your endeavors. Noelle, thanks again.
Thank you.